Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Vicki, you want to call roll?
Raymond Mondragon,
Here.
Gail Tarson,
Here.
Kevin Cass,
Here.
Alan Kinlan,
Here.
Matthew Glenn,
Present.
Danny Jeriwala,
Here.
Brett Johnson,
Present.
and Jason Gonzalez.
Here.
Okay. Any of you had a chance to look over the minutes of the last meeting? I would take a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. All right. So we've got some changes to our LEDA ordinance. Justin, you want to give us your pitch on this?
Absolutely. Thank you and good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Good
members
morning,
of the
sir.
committee. And so, if you recall, a couple of months ago, or I guess probably longer than that at this point in time, we had an applicant apply for some of our LEDA funding, and it is actually Bandolero Brewing, to be able to purchase some manufacturing equipment for their facility. And one of the reasons that we couldn't proceed forward with the application is that underneath our definition for a business that we actually require a minimum of 50% of the business revenue come from a customer base outside of the state of New Mexico. And the intention of that language in there is to bring those outside dollars into our community. However, it does basically tie some of our hands on some of the applicants that we do receive. And so when we start looking at economic development and philosophical opinions, I suppose, is what is economic development? And so, any dollars coming into the city of Clovis, no matter where it is, outside of our municipal boundary, is good for the city of Clovis and is good for Curry County. And so we've also had some other applicants, and there's been discussions, not necessarily applicants, but of how that could impact us even from an ag standpoint. If somebody wanted to have a fertilizer company come in place, and there's a huge industry obviously in our region for that, and they could sell lots of product. However, because most of their business may be done within Curry County, we could not utilize LEDA funds to help a business start or improve or expand. And so we went back and started looking at our definitions, and obviously removed that language out of there, as you see in section 2. Ultimately, it is the EIB's recommendation to the City Commission on any project, and so put in the ordinance in a place to where you guys have the abilities to make those recommendations, and the City Commission has those decisions versus the ordinance dictating to them what they can and cannot review. So we just thought it may be good practice to remove that out of there. In doing so, we also had to revise the definition of economic-based jobs. So on page 2, you see the current language that's in there that also contained the minimum of 50% for or more of services or goods from outside the state of New Mexico. And then the proposed language there is on page 3. The other thing that we took this opportunity to do is on page 4, underneath the state statute, we are allowed to utilize LEDA funding to go towards cultural facilities. The city of Clovis, at a point in time, chose not to allow local LEDA dollars to go to cultural facilities. State dollars still could. But once again, if we're cleaning this up, putting the power back into our boards and committees from a recommendation standpoint and the city commission for ultimate decision-making authority, we figured that, hey, let's take this opportunity to remove that out of there as well, to where an application could be put in for a cultural facility if so chosen, and then moved forward. The final thing that we did in our revisions is just cleaned up some language on page 5, defaults, and removed the language of reneges out of there. It's the same thing, and so just trying to clean that up as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
No, I like them.
No, those are the changes we want.
I got a question. Explain to me what a cultural center is that we would feel necessary to give money to.
They're movie theaters, they're, I believe like civic centers, I mean, it's museums, it's that type of facility.
I'll take a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I so move that we approve the changes to the ordinance as stated by Mr. Justin Howald.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Actually, I'm sorry, I am so sorry. This is Danny Jeriwala. I'm through the Google Meet, I'm attending it, and I raised my hand. I don't know if anybody saw it. So I had a question. Before we do the first and the second, I have this question for Mr. Howald. Mr. Howald, I know we are doing all these, changes and cleanups and everything. And I think so about last year sometime, earlier last year, I had a question about the whole LIDA funding, you know? And in that one, also in the state statute, the hotel industry and the restaurant industry were included too, but the city adopted not to include it. And I would just like to bring this to the board's attention, and if they are okay with it, while we are doing this cleanup, would it be a possibility to discuss it, and if we can include the hotels and the restaurants also into it, which is already adopted by the state, it's just the city that did not do it. That was my question.
Mr. Howald?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Jerwal is correct. And so, under, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I wanted to say off the top of my head, it was underneath a qualifying entity. There is language in there, that includes restaurants and hotels. And so, that is something that, we too could take a look at if you also would like us to.
And I'm in support of this. Everything, I'm in support of this. But I thought that while we were doing this, might as well address that issue as well.
Well, at the time, we talked about that, and there was a reason. What, I can't remember though. What was the reason they were excluded in the first place?
They were already in construction. They-
Not that particular case, but
Okay.
just hotel and restaurants in general. Was it because they fell under another? I don't remember.
Where's our historian?
Obviously, I wasn't here back in, when the original ordinance was created, so I can't speak to the reasoning for leaving that out.
But didn't we talk about it also when we were revisiting it to include retail?
When we were adding the
Well, it's been-
retail language.
It's been a while.
They didn't, when we were adding the retail, they definitely didn't want to have restaurants in the retail conversation, but I don't remember us talking about hotel facilities.
Well, none of us can remember why.
I
We
would
can't
just
think
like
of a reason
to,
why.
I would just like to say that the state is above the city, and I understand every city can customize it. But I was saying if the state is, and if this was not a part of it also, and if we are including this, how is the hotel and restaurants different than anything else that we are cleaning up? That's my question.
Business including a restaurant.
If, one of the things they considered was, that was more for smaller, I thought, was more for smaller communities that didn't have a restaurant or didn't have a hotel, was needing something like that. But I don't know why we wouldn't put that in there.
I do know that when we were discussing leader for retail and starting to add that back into the ordinance, there was a lot of feedback regarding from the restaurant industry and not wanting restaurants to be able to be incentivized. Yes, it was still authorized underneath the state statute as a qualifying entity. However, previously, the city of Clovis had not included lodging facilities or restaurants. And so we chose not to include those back in when we were looking at it for retail.
This is also, Mr. Chairman, if I may, years ago, I really don't remember how many years back it's been now, there had been a discussion around the state during the sessions of the legislature. As you all know, I've been involved with New Mexico IDEA, the Economic Developer Association, and we originally, at the beginning, opposed retail being engaged with LIDA. The issue with the hotel industries is they had the availability of the IRBs, industrial revenue bonds, through their communities. And again, that's IRBs. Then, as the years progressed, it started a discussion of the smaller communities, as you said, Mr. Chairman. Your small rural frontier communities didn't have any restaurants, didn't have gas stations and so forth. Could we possibly help? And from there, it's kind of failed every year until Mayor Morris brought up Senate Bill 49, and that came through, and New Mexico IDEA supported that, along with a lot of the other communities and mayors that the mayor spoke with. And then it became, you know, of course, it passed Senate Bill 49 on retail. As far as the hotel industry, we had a discussion about that, Danny, with the New Mexico IDEA group, and we felt that we should leave that alone at this point and allow the hotel industry to go after IRBs within their communities.
That being said, just one sec, I mean, I just have one point to bring in. Like, if we keep both the avenues open, then the city has their own decision to make, and obviously we don't want them to double dip, like IRB and then also come to the LIDA. But at least that gives the city an opportunity, including the hotel and the restaurants, doesn't automatically say that they will be given that LIDA funding. It also has to go through the process, you know? And I just think, and that gives a smaller community an option. Okay, well, you could not apply for the IRB because this is why it is. Well, why don't we approach the other one, once or the other, depending which fits them better, according to the city, you know? And they'll have an option, but by not including one, they just run out of option one, and if it's not, then it's done. And going back to the same situation when the hotels were applying, I thought one of the city commissioners, like, no, and I'm pretty positive, one of the city commissioners did bring it to my attention that your IRB application doesn't qualify, but maybe when the LIDA is approved, that's when we can revisit about any other hotels that comes into town to do it. And believe me, being in a hotel industry, I feel that having and welcoming a hotel into our industry, our community, is a very important thing, especially with the New Mexico Municipal League and all those big conferences coming into our town. We would have an opportunity to host them and then not approach individual hotels to see how many rooms can you give or this and that. I mean, there are a lot more to it, but according to me, if it was me, I would leave the options open for all industries to apply either for the LIDA or IRB, and then the city can make the decision that, oh, which would be the best route for them. Say suppose there is a 500-room convention hotel coming to Clovis. Well, then there'll be IRB would fit there. Maybe it's a 66-room, 70-room hotel coming. Oh, you know what, IRB would not be feasible for the city, but why don't you guys apply through LIDA? I mean, they cannot technically solicit, but as a business, they would have an idea that way. That was just my point.
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of further discussion, let's vote on this ordinance and the changes, and then we can come back later and have further discussions on what Danny is talking about. We can have further discussions on that.
Chairman, if I may, just real quickly, I can explain what the change would be. Oh, thank you. If I may have the floor.
Yes, please.
Sure. So the change that Mr. Jarawala is talking about is really just 5 or 6 words, that difference between the statute that reads the same way it did before the new retail changes. But on page 4, the top of page 4, paragraph D, so right after the first 2 words, a business, the statute reads, comma, including a restaurant or lodging establishment, comma, and then it continues on with in which. And so that would be just it would just be in the inclusion of those 6 words to track the statute if we wanted to do that.
And Mr. Chairman, further to Mr. Morris's point, that language was in the state statutes prior to any changes regarding retail. I don't know how long that language has been in the state statute, or when the city of Clovis, I guess, chose not to put that into our LIDA ordinance, if it was during the original creation of our LIDA ordinance. And so, once again, and that's what I'm referring to is, I don't know why that was chosen to be left out, because that could have been back in the, 90s, when our LIDA ordinance was created.
Yeah, that was the decade I was born. And so, I guess I don't want to prolong this conversation, but I also think, Danny, to your point, I don't understand enough about when somebody qualifies for IRBs and doesn't, and what all the avenues are there. But I would, again, my understanding of what the local ordinance was intended to do originally was to build industry. And I know we're now kind of having a redefining conversation on quote unquote what is industry, but I don't know. I guess I understand why the restaurants specifically probably oppose that pretty directly, because that wasn't something that was probably circled as, well, I forget the term, a target zone thing. But again, I also ask the question, isn't that the job and responsibility of this board to, as those come in front, for us to say, we probably don't need, another 5 restaurants or another jewelry store, or insurance agency, or things to that effect. I think that's kind of the point of the board. So, I don't know. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of amending and appealing all of these things, but if that was put in before I was born and we don't really know why, I don't really understand why it's there.
We did say that as we progress with the LIDA ordinance, since it's something new to us as well, is that we can make changes as we proceed and move forward. Also, Mr. Morris, if we're going to remove cultural facility on 4 at the bottom, we probably need to remove H. Delete that one on page 4. H on cultural facility, probably remove that.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the EIB, sort of casting my mind back to restaurants and hotels and so on, and then thinking about the retail strategies and the gap analysis. I don't believe that a gap analysis exists certainly doesn't for hotels, which is what you're being asked to consider. So I don't know how you'd quantify that. And then the restaurants, you're exactly right with the restaurant conversation. And I think that's why years ago, when the city fathers created it the way that they did, they left those things out.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and vote on the motion at hand. If there's any more discussion about the motion, yes.
Would you like me to answer Mr. Mondragon's question? So the way I read paragraph or the qualifying entity definitions on page 3, I think we need to keep H in there, cultural facility, if we're going to allow them to be applicants for both state and city funding. So I guess I don't understand, if we remove that from H, then we wouldn't be able to provide city funding, LIDA funding to cultural facilities, the way I understand it. Or state funding.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Would you, all in
So
favor?
are we including the hotels in this, into this, or
We're
no,
going-
not at this point?
Danny, we've already got this drawn up. We're gonna vote on this, and then we're gonna come back and discuss this.
Okay,
But let's
perfect.
get,
Thank you.
let's get this, let this,
Thank you so
get this going. Yes, thank you. So, all in favor of accepting the motion to accept the changes as outlined in yellow for the, for the 50%, and take the word renege out, I like that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign? Okay. That passes. Okay, so let's go on, and then we'll come back to you during the good of the order, Danny. Number 5, Justin, you want to talk about the policies and procedures for retail?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. And so, obviously, at our last meeting, we talked about changing our policies and procedures to remove some of the requirements for applicants for retail projects, providing their financials, 3 years worth of history, et cetera. And so what we did, went back into the policies and made some changes. And just for your information too, we made some minor edits, capitalized some things, corrected some things that needed to be corrected originally. So the substantive changes, if you start on page 6 of the document, under the incentive level evaluation criteria, you can see where we've, under investment, we crossed out or struck financial capacity of the applicant to undertake, complete, and sustain the proposed project. So if we're not considering past financials, et cetera, we went ahead and proposed removing that out of the language. Other factors considered, we also removed the financial strength as also a consideration in funding decisions. And so we went ahead and struck that out there as well. On page 7, we revised the language to simply state applicants are required to submit a business plan and/or pro forma financial statements which would substantiate their business. And so by simplifying that language, we're not going to require the past history. I still think it is important for you guys to see what they're proposing to do, how they're actually proposing to make it work from a financial situation, just not necessarily provide all their past history of what they've done. So those were my recommended changes for that particular language. The other major language change was on page 10 of the document. Under our pass-fail criteria, item number 3, it simply changed it to say satisfactory initial demonstration of pro forma, or I guess should add in there probably / business plan as to pass-fail. So if they haven't provided that to you, then they definitely should fail. So those changes, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Question for Tina and Lee. Will this take care of some of your concerns that you had addressed? I know you and I had a conversation about that.
Yes, I think it will. That hasn't been the concern for all of them that are applying. A lot of them are interested in the LEDA, and then they find out that it comes as a reimbursement of the tax, and they're looking for money up front. So some of those, this wasn't the concern, but there are some that are concerned strictly about opening up their books and sharing their financials. So you're paying your GRT is really substantiating that you're in business. And, I think Mayor Morris said it best, it's a win-win. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the revisions to the policies and procedures for the retail as addressed by Mr. Howell.
Second. A motion and a second to accept the changes in our LEDA for retail. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay. All right, so now for the good of the order. I guess let me get through this. Tina, do you want to talk about any of the projects that you've got going on, or anything that's what's going on in Clovis?
Well, I can just add that we do have a manufacturer who's looking to bring 50 jobs here. They'll be out in a couple weeks to look at some land. We're really excited about that. We had our last meeting yesterday for the planning for the TIP strategies. So we met with Dr. Johnston at ENMU and Dr. Jones over at CCC. We're hoping to get started on the implementation of TIP strategies. And then this weekend, I guess on Sunday, I'll be leaving to the retail convention in Las Vegas. I'm excited about that. But I think everything's going good. I feel a lot of positive momentum. Yeah, I don't have a formal report prepared since I wasn't on the agenda, but I would ask, and I mentioned this earlier before the meeting started, our board meetings are the third Wednesday at 7:30 a.m., so I don't know if it's possible to move this to maybe the second or the fourth Wednesday on our quarterly meetings.
Or later in the day. as
Or
Mr.
not
later in the
7:30
day.
in the morning.
I don't know what everybody's open to, but I still do 7:30 no matter what day it is, but, you know, I've had to cancel our board meetings a couple of times to be here, and I'm happy to be here. But if we could change that, that'd be great.
And Mr. Chairman, we did
Or
go
by
back and
mornings
check
at
the
5:30.
ordinance, and it just says that the board is required to meet quarterly. It doesn't necessarily specify a date or a time.
So can we, without doing anything formal, just, Vicky, as you schedule these things, check with them, make sure we're not interfering with that?
That'd be
That work?
great. Thank you.
Well, I mean, or you guys, I mean, if
we
we
could-
still wanted to keep it on the Wednesday, I mean, we can push it back later in the day depending on y'all's availability and schedules. And so just,
I will
take any
personally bring
direction.
pizzas if we do this from noon to 1.
This is gonna be the third Wednesday at noon.
Your meetings start at 7, right? Tina, 7 a.m.?
My 7,
And you end, usually, you
Think
end
about
by around 8 o'clock?
we end, I would say to be safe, sometimes we go, normally 8, but it can go as long as 8:15, 8:30.
So sometimes if we schedule it for 9, maybe?
I think 9 would be great.
8?
Anything?
Seems much more reasonable to this side of the table. Or lunchtime, again. The pizza offer still stands.
Any questions for me?
Do we need to put that as a motion, or is that something we can just, I don't
no,
think so.
we just need some direction. So that
Mr.
when we
Chairman.
schedule it.
So for the people that typically come to these meetings, the public, those that are wanting to apply or present a proposal, what would be better for them? What would be a good time? I would assume 7 o'clock in the morning can be a challenge if people are coming from out of town, they've got to come the day sooner. You know, would an afternoon, late afternoon, would an evening? You know, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, you know, if someone's coming in to apply for something, they're gonna work with the schedule that they're given, but I do think 9 or later is probably more appropriate.
Okay.
Why don't we just leave it at the call of the chair in cooperation with you guys in the city? And then they can set the meeting.
And then maybe, if it's not on the third Wednesday, maybe 8 o'clock?
Sure.
And Mr.
Little, is that still way too early there, Part?
Mr. Chair,
We have all day to have meetings, guys. We don't have to start with those.
and Mr. Chair, I mean, a set time and day is actually best from a scheduling standpoint. That way, you guys can put it on your calendars, and us from a scheduling standpoint, we can put it on our calendars, and then if have an applicant, they know that we routinely meet on at this time and date. And so, while, yes, we can have a meeting at the call of the chair, we prefer schedules.
Alan, you can wear your pajamas to this meeting if you want.
He might be.
Watch what you ask for.
What about the second
o'clock
Wednesday
on
of
the-
the month?
9 o'clock on the second Wednesday, if that works for all of you.
Okay.
And we're accommodated.
That's wonderful, thank you.
Second Wednesday, 9 o'clock.
I just had a question for Tina.
Yes.
It was just a follow-up question about how Big R is moving as far as, what is the progress on it for the Big R store?
The last I've heard, they should be open this fall. I don't have a specific date on that. I'll be meeting with the mall manager tomorrow. We're gonna strategize before my trip to Las Vegas. So I will get an update from him then. And I'd be happy to pass that on.
Thank you, thank you. I was just following up on that. And then we had discussed in the last meeting, maybe there was a possibility of a couple of more retailers coming into the mall. And where do we stand as far as that?
They have several letters of intent. I don't think they have anything concrete yet on those, so I wouldn't be able to speak to those yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
thank you, though.
Hey, Alan,
Yes, ma'am.
if we can, are we done with your question, Danny?
Okay.
He's still talking.
Thank you, I'm done, yeah.
Okay, question, Ellen, would 8:30 be okay? The
We're
reason-
moving to more reasonable, yes.
Okay, the
Yeah.
reason I'm asking that, so my store opens at 10, and I'd hate to have to walk out of here before this meeting's concluded. And we generally get over and done in time, but I would just hate to have to get up and walk out. And there's times when I don't have any support. So if it pleases the board, could we start at 8:30?
I will make a motion that we,
Can't make a motion. Just give us some direction.
You just make a motion to get here.
yeah, I'll make a motion to get here. Yes, I think 8:30 is a far more reasonable,
Reasonable?
Okay.
and.
Is that
and
okay with
We're,
everyone?
we're progressively moving in the right direction.
You, Tina?
That works great for me.
She said normally 8 to 8:30, so hopefully that works. Okay,
Perfect.
thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Appreciate that
Yeah.
negotiation.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Danny, I'm gonna get to you next, or I'm gonna go to Raymond and then we'll get back on Danny's.
I just wanted to share just a couple of things. Our office received this information, so I'll be able to send it to Vicky's if she wants to distribute it out. It's called Investing in America. And this particular information focuses on New Mexico. And this is in regards to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it was a presentation that I attended in New Orleans as well. And New Mexico will be receiving $3 billion in bipartisan infrastructure funding. Was announced, headed to New Mexico with over 287 specific projects identified for funding. And in this document specifically highlights Resilience Project Spotlight, and the mayor is the chairman of the Eastern New Mexico Rural Water System Pipeline. He might want to comment. The Department of the Interior awarded a first installment of $160 million in funding to support the completion of the Eastern New Mexico Rural Water System Pipeline. The project will distribute water from the reservoir to Clovis Portales, Cannon Air Force Base, Texaco, and Elida. And it also has a list of the rural water projects that are major, like Lewis and Clark water projects and so forth, that we're all aware of. But it identifies roads, bridges, public transit. It's a lot of good information to read of what's coming to New Mexico as far as federal dollars. So Vicki, if you could, I'll send this to you, if you could distribute to them. And Mayor, I don't know if you got a copy of this or not. I'll be happy to send that. I think I sent it to you already. It should be in your mailbox. But I just wanted to share that with you. It's a lot of federal dollars coming to New Mexico.
Okay. All right, Danny. So, I mean, my first thought on this is that that's the one thing we haven't had trouble attracting is hotels and restaurants. But that's just, that hadn't seemed to be a problem.
What I would say, this is only my thought, is that let's keep the avenues open as far as the businesses and the application goes. Give a fair chance to the businesses want to apply, especially if they are listed in the state statute, right? Then city can decide on that. So henceforth, you never know the position the project is coming in. Whether it's real really that project needs assistance. I mean, again, I'm referencing back to the hotels that applied for it, you know, because you never know, you know, when everything is all good, and if the businesses wanna come, and if they think that they could apply for it, let them apply, they'll pay the application fee, you know? If they think that they can put a valid reason that they would qualify for it. But let's not just close the doors, because you never know what the situation might be in 10 years, or 5 years per se, or even 2 years, as close as that. But when you have this avenue completely closed, then nobody has that option, especially if it's already in the state statute. Including them doesn't guarantee them that they will be approved. At least give them a fair chance depending on what situation demands at that point. That was just my thought, you know, and to the city, it's just the application fee, it's extra revenue. Let them do it, apply. But if it's never in there, then they would not. I mean, you know, and like I mentioned at that point, one of the city commissioner recommended, okay, IRB is not a good deal for us, for the city. Maybe you could apply the LIDA when it qualifies, and that would be better that way. So see, there is a better way out there. I mean, options, I always believe in options. Doesn't mean options are guaranteed.
So,
That's just my say on it, you know?
Danny, if you don't mind, it doesn't hurt to have them in there. It just like, there's no guarantee any of our applicants are gonna fit into our gap analysis, which we would deny if they don't fit that gap analysis anyway. I don't see any harm, and if we can't, any of us, think of a valid reason as to why we would exclude them, because none of these applicants are guaranteed getting approved if they don't fit that gap. So that's my 2 cents.
Counselor, you got any comments on this?
No, sir, I think we can narrowly tailor our ordinance as we see fit, so there's no legal implication or reason we should or shouldn't do it. We can be more restrictive than the state if we choose to.
And Mr. Chairman, obviously, it's not an action item today or a discussion item, but we can certainly go back and do some research and try to research those past minutes when the ordinance was originally put into place, just from an historical standpoint, so you know maybe what they were thinking. And I'm assuming that it was that we were focused on industry solely alone, and so they did choose to leave that language out. However, that does not mean we can't, at some point in time in the future, you can't make changes to ordinances.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess I'd like to see it on next quarter's agenda at 8:30 in the morning. And, yeah, I mean, my whole, I guess my opinion hasn't changed, right? I mean, we lean on the gap analysis for these types of things. I look at that and think, I mean, is it going to be potentially more work for this board? Sure. We might have to review, you know, X amount of more applications, but to Danny's point, I mean, that is, I guess, additional revenues. If it doesn't fall into gap, I mean, that makes the job fairly easy, but to his point, you know, what if 5 or 10 years from now, the gap analysis looks different?
And did our gap analysis look at restaurant, okay, so that's something we'd have to include.
Correct.
In future gap analysis.
And so this is, so when you look at the statute itself and the ordinance itself, retail is a separate qualifying entity even from restaurants and hotels. And so we don't have, our policies that we just put into place were specific to retail. The other qualifying entities fall underneath our other policies. And so we'd have to go back and look at how those are drafted and make any necessary changes if you also chose to those policies and procedures.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, so I guess you have direction now. We'll have a report next quarter.
Absolutely, we can certainly get to work on that.
But another consideration is going to be, there would have to be a cost to gap analysis for the restaurants and hotels,
Yeah, we'll go
right?
back and take a look and see what it would take to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other items for the good of the order? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Does Mike, Kevin, you just hanging out? You got anything?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, stand up.